We'll be starting shortly. As a reminder, go ahead and rename yourself if you need to. We'd love to see where folks are from, so feel free to tell us in the chat where you are zooming in from. All right. We will get started now. So thank you for joining us at the fourth webinar in the Social Justice and Equity series. My name is Alex Ambrose. I'm the policy analyst at New Jersey Policy Perspective, and I'm a former policy assistant at New Jersey LCV and your guest moderator for tonight's event. As a reminder, please stay muted during the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and available online afterwards. Once again, this webinar is being translated into Spanish. Thank you to Sofia Rosa from Latino Action Network Foundation for translating tonight. There will be a time at the end for Q&A, but as we go through the presentation, you're welcome to drop your questions into the chat where New Jersey LCV staff will be collecting them. So, why this series? We know that some people may be wondering why an environmental organization like New Jersey LCV is discussing voting rights and its intersection with race. First, New Jersey LCV is founded on the premise that we need strong environmental champions elected into office to enact bold environmental policies. That's why New Jersey LCV gets involved in municipal, county, state, and congressional races and endorses environmental champions, and why we try so hard to get out the vote in general. Second, some of New Jersey LCV's closest partners representing environmental justice communities have explained that we must name the implications of race and income disparities when we talk about access to clean air, clean water, and high quality open spaces. Third, New Jersey LCV believes that the environmental movement has missed opportunities to successfully advance bold and sweeping policy change because we have built too narrow a movement. The environmental movement has viewed environmental issues too narrowly, missing opportunities for collaboration and building more power with partners on intersectional issues such as public health, economic justice, and more. New Jersey LCV knows that this has prevented the building of a large-scale, multiracial, and cross-class movement for change that is needed to ensure a just transition of our economy and our other systems. Black and brown-led organizations and individuals have known this for years, and we join other environmental advocates in trying to listen and take action. Simply put, the environmental movement cannot be successful without racial, social, and economic justice. Partners in environmental justice and social justice groups have supported our movement, and New Jersey LCV believes it's a priority to reciprocate that support, advocacy, and solidarity. So that's why we're hosting this webinar series, to better understand racial and social justice issues in our state, while touching on environmental justice and environmental racism. We're excited to learn from tonight's speakers, and I hope you are too. So, why is the focus of tonight's webinar on race and voting rights? As we mentioned previously, we can't have good environmental policies without good candidates elected into office. And in a democracy, we get to decide who we want in power through the power of our vote. And as you may already know, the voter registration deadline for the primary was last week on May 16th, which means election day is right around the corner. Within the last decade, New Jersey has passed a number of pro-democracy laws, including automatic voter registration, which automatically registers those who are getting a license or other state-issued ID at the NVC, and in-person early voting, which allows ballots to be cast at early voting polling locations 3 to 5 days ahead of a primary and 9 days ahead of a general election. However, the weakening of federal laws and the widespread attempts at voter suppression in other states means New Jersey cannot take its foot off the pedal when it comes to voting access. New Jersey voters, especially voters of color, often face challenges when trying to vote, such as late openings and long lines on election day, struggles with physical access to polling locations for those with disabilities, and language accessibility for those with limited English proficiency. On top of all that, many voters find it difficult to take their cases to court when they are disenfranchised. And since the 2016 election, there has been a national surge in voter suppression bills. When voting is suppressed or made difficult for some, our whole democracy suffers. And although New Jersey is one of the states that has proactively introduced legislation to expand voting access, there are still many remaining issues that obstruct equal access to the ballot. So, having said that, that is why I am thrilled to bring in our two speakers tonight, who have a breadth of knowledge on voting rights in New Jersey and across the country. But before I turn it over to our speakers tonight, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this event for supporting and uplifting this webinar in alphabetical order. Thank you to the co-sponsors, ACLU of NJ, ANJAC, the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, League of Women Voters of New Jersey, New Brunswick Area NAACP, New Jersey Black Empowerment Coalition, New York Science and Sustainability, New Jersey Highlands Coalition, New Jersey Working Families Party, Social Justice Matters, Trust for Public Lands, Voters of Tomorrow, New Jersey, and tonight's honorary sponsors, New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, Latino Action Network Foundation, and New Jersey Policy Perspective. A special thank you to Maria Santiago Valentin, Steering Committee member of NJPEAC, and Marcus Sibley, Environmental and Climate Justice Chair of the Southern Burlington County, New Jersey NAACP, for your help in inspiring New Jersey LCV to pursue this series. Without further ado, we are excited to introduce our first speaker for this webinar, Nuzhat Chowdhury. Nuzhat is a senior counsel with the Democracy and Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. At the Institute, she works on voting rights and democracy-related issues, including leading the campaign for a New Jersey Voting Rights Act. Nuzhat comes to the Institute from the Brennan Center for Justice, where she worked as a legal and legislative consultant on projects to reform elections administration in New York and to increase election security across the country. Prior to the Brennan Center, Nuzhat worked at the New York City Council, where she was legislative and committee counsel to the Committees on Aging, Civil Service and Labor, and Veterans. Originally from the center of Midwest, Columbia, New Jersey, Nuzhat is a 2015 graduate from Columbia Law School. She is serving on the Government Ethics and State Affairs Committee for the New York City Bar Association for the 2022-2025 term. I will now pass it over to Nuzhat.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Alex, and welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm really excited to speak to you all about voting rights in the US, the federal landscape of voting rights, as well as what voting rights looks like right now in New Jersey and how we can strengthen both of these things. This is especially important since we do have elections coming up in New Jersey, the primaries in a few weeks, and then general elections in November. So we want everyone to understand why voting is so important and how, in what ways it has been weakened across the country and how we can work together to make sure it becomes strong again. Next slide. So one of the questions that we often get at the Institute is, why should New Jersey care about voting rights? We aren't a Southern state. Why does it matter that we have strong voting rights here? And the answer to this is that New Jersey has a history of voting rights, of voter suppression, that many people don't know about. So I'm going to first give you a little bit of insight into that and go back all the way to some of our first constitutions here. Next slide. So originally, New Jersey's constitution actually gave one of the broadest definitions of voting rights in the country. Our original state constitution in 1776 gave voting rights to basically everyone, as long as they had 50 pounds and had resided within the county for 12 months. Notice that that language doesn't restrict it to anyone of a specific race or anyone of a specific gender. And in fact, in 1790, the legislature even made sure that everyone knew that this was meant to be very broad. They amended the language to include he or she, meaning that the New Jersey Constitution gave the right to vote to men and women in 1790. Unfortunately, they took that all back in 1807. In 1807, the New Jersey legislature restricted the law to make sure that it said that only tax-paying white male citizens had the right to vote. And in fact, something that doesn't get talked about a lot is that New Jersey was the first northern state to restrict the vote to white men only. So this isn't something that only happens in the South. It happens in New Jersey and in northern states as well. Next slide. So New Jersey has started the restrictions in 1807, but it continued passing more voter suppression and restriction laws. In 1844, the law was changed so that people with criminal convictions from voting could no longer vote in New Jersey. And New Jersey was also very resistant to other amendments and voting rights laws that were being passed across the country, right? So New Jersey opposed the Emancipation Proclamation. It was the last state in the nation to abolish slavery. Only when Congress itself enacted the 15th Amendment in 1870 did New Jersey give Black people back the right to vote. And that restriction continued, right? So if you'll remember, that 1844 law that restricted those with criminal convictions for voting, that wasn't changed until December 2019, 175 years later, when the law was finally changed to restore voting rights to those who are on parole and probation. So over 83,000 people finally received their right to vote again, but it took 175 years very recently to do so. Next. So that's a history of why it is important that New Jersey is in the forefront of voting rights. The history of New Jersey itself isn't as clean and progressive as sometimes we like to pretend that it is. So what does that mean about voting rights protections on the federal level as well as the state level? I'm going to talk about the federal level first, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's happening currently in New Jersey. Next. So federal voting rights first. Next. So the big piece of legislation that we talk about when we talk about federal voting rights is the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. So after decades of organizing by Black activists, including the late Congressman John R. Lewis, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, or the VRA, in 1965. The federal VRA was passed to protect voters against racial discrimination in voting, and was later amended to protect those who are in language minorities also from experiencing voting discrimination at the polls. It was meant to enact the promises of the 15th Amendment and make sure that everyone who is an eligible voter had equal access to the vote in the country. So some of the things that the VRA did was it outlawed literacy tests that had existed. It allowed attorney generals to challenge poll taxes that existed at state and local levels. It made any sort of voter registration obstruction legal. It created a pre-clearance program, which is complicated, but very generally speaking, the pre-clearance program made it easier for the federal government and courts to come in and stop states and local governments from passing discriminatory voting laws. It was signed into law in August of 1965, and it protected the right to vote for all citizens. It was at its height one of the most important pieces and most effective pieces of civil rights legislation this country has ever seen. Next. Unfortunately, what has happened to the federal VRA is that over the past decade or so, it has been substantially weakened from what it used to be. There's one Supreme Court case that really weakened the federal VRA to what we see today. And you might have heard of it. It's Shelby County v. Holder. It was decided in 2013. And what the Supreme Court did in Shelby County v. Holder is, if you'll remember, I talked about the pre-clearance program, right? The pre-clearance program that made sure that the federal government could come in and stop discriminatory policies from being passed in states that already had histories of voter discrimination. The court came in, it invalidated a specific tool a specific section of the VRA, it's section 5. And once they took that section out, it robbed the VRA of its strongest voter protection tool. So as a result, since Shelby County v. Holder, no state or local government has to be checked by a court or the federal government before passing new voter laws. They can simply go ahead and pass those without any oversight. Next. So what is the impact of this? The impact of Shelby County v. Holder is that restrictive voting laws have increased since 2013. Since these places no longer have to have federal oversight, states have passed a lot of laws that have repealed, pro-democracy tools. So states that had online voter registration have introduced legislation to repeal those. They've shortened early voting times, they have shuttered down same-day voter registration, and they've also passed laws and policies that just make it harder to vote. So voter ID requirements, making sure that there are fewer polling sites that people can access, passing line warming bans to criminalize helping people stand in line, especially those long lines, in order to vote. Across the country, what we have seen since Shelby is that these restrictive laws have passed, and these laws in particular impact Black, Latina, Latino, and other voters of color the most. So it has, in these states, made it much harder for lots of groups of people, and particularly voters of color, to exercise their right to vote. Next. There is a piece of federal legislation that is currently pending that could resolve this problem. So the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act was a bill that was proposed in Congress that would restore the federal VRA and strengthen the parts that the Supreme Court has already weakened. So it would restore the pre-clearance program, it would strengthen voter protection tools, it would give courts more of an ability to review policies. It would basically take the VRA, which is currently much weaker than it used to be, and it would restore it to the height of its power. Unfortunately, the VRA, the the JVRA has failed to pass the Senate twice now, and right now there doesn't appear to be any movement to go forward with it. It just remains in an introduced status. So now I'm going to move to the voting rights in New Jersey, and what does it look like in New Jersey currently? So I think the important thing to know about New Jersey is that New Jersey is one of the most diverse states in the entire country. We have almost a majority people of color population. It has one of the most language diversity across the state in the entire nation. Unfortunately, despite this diversity, out of 120 state senators in assembly members in New Jersey, 70% are white and non-Hispanic, and 2/3 are male. Our legislature does not look like the people of New Jersey, and this is a problem. One of the reasons that we have this unrepresentative legislature is that in New Jersey, Black, Latina, Latino, and other voters of color face a lot more challenges in exercising their right to vote. And as Alex mentioned earlier, if you don't get to exercise your right to vote, you don't get to vote in candidates who look like you and who represent your interests. Your right to vote is extremely important for this reason. Next. So some of the issues that particularly voters of color face in New Jersey they're chronic problems. They happen every single election cycle that we see. So especially in areas where there are heavily populated voters of color, we see polling sites that have delayed openings. We see sites that have very long lines. They lack signs for accessibility for voters who are older or who are disabled or have medical issues. There's lack of language accessibility. Even though New Jersey is one of the most language diverse states in the nation, we have a lot of polling sites that don't have materials that are translated, that don't have interpreters for the languages that we see in those communities. And there are other problems too. You know, we face voter registration problems in New Jersey. There's lack of voting privacy at polling places. And one thing to remember is that these issues are not isolated to one group, but they disproportionately impact voters of color in communities across the state. Next. But that being said, New Jersey has made a lot of pro-democracy progress in the past couple of years, which is really exciting. So some of the ways that New Jersey has increased democracy or strengthened it is as I mentioned in 2019, we restored the right to vote for people on parole or probation. There was a bill that, responding to the community concerns, banned police presence at polls for a certain distance. We have passed laws that expands the access to vote. So we have early voting now, automatic voter registration. You can register online to vote. There's much more vote by mail than there used to be before. And in New Jersey, we passed a ballot cure period, which means that if for some reason there's something defective in your ballot, instead of having your ballot thrown out, you have a certain period of time in which you can fix it and then have your vote counted. So all of these are great progress that we have made so far in the state, although there is much that still needs to be done. So what would it look like? What would we need to do on the federal landscape, as well as in New Jersey, to achieve a racially just democracy? There are a couple of ways, there are many ways actually, in which we can try and make democracy equally accessible for all. So we can pass more pro-democracy reforms, again, on the federal level as well as on the state level. Measures such as same-day voter registration, increased vote by mail, improved language access at polling sites and in polling materials. We can end prison gerrymandering, which is the practice of counting prison populations in their where people are incarcerated as opposed to the communities that they come from. We need better and more racially equitable redistricting procedures. We need to restore the Federal Voting Rights Act so that it can be that strong civil rights legislation that it used to be. And while that is pending, we can start passing state voting rights acts. This is something that a lot of states have started doing now, making sure that even if on the federal level, the federal VRA remains weak, that these states have strong state voting rights acts so that they can at least protect voters within the state. So there are a couple of states that have already passed these acts. California, New York, Oregon, Virginia, and Washington have already passed strong state VRAs. And there are states that are currently pending and are considering legislation to pass their own state VRAs. New Jersey is one of them. We are joined by Michigan, Maryland, and Connecticut. And what we are seeing slowly is that states across the nation aren't waiting for the federal VRA to get further weakened. They are passing state VRAs and they are considering state VRAs so that we can protect voters in our home states under state law, even if federal law isn't strong. Next. So that being said, we do have elections coming up in New Jersey. So I just wanted to flag a few things for you guys to make sure that you are voting in the upcoming primary elections. So in 2023, we have the entire state legislature. That means the General Assembly as well as State Senate. Everyone is up for election again. And we have you can vote either early voting or you can vote during primary election day. If you are already registered for a party, you can go ahead and submit a vote by mail ballot if you have applied for one. But early voting is June 2nd through June 4th. And then election day is June 6th. And again, if you have already declared your party, then you can apply until May 30th by mail to vote by mail. If you have not declared a political party, that's totally fine. All you need to do is go to the polling site and then do so, and you can vote at the polling site the day of, as long as you are already registered to vote. Next. And then just a few resources if you have any questions about the upcoming primary election or about voting in New Jersey in general. The Institute's website has an election guide that has frequently asked questions. It has dates. The New Jersey State website has a ton of information. You can check voting dates, you can check your registration, you can check where ballot drop boxes are and where polling locations are. And then two last notes to help you guys. One is New Jersey went through redistricting last year, which means that you may be voting in new districts this upcoming election. If you go to fairdistrictsnj.org, you can see what your new district is, or maybe you're still in your old district. And at any point, if you have any sorts of problem voting, or if you know someone who is having problems voting, you can call either 1-866-OUR-VOTE or 1-800-792-VOTE. These are election protection hotlines, and they run 24/7 during this period. And someone on that hotline can help you if you are struggling to vote. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Nuzhat. All right, so now we're going to do something a little different. Instead of a second presentation, we're going to have a live interview with activist Annette Scott, who has spent years on equity and voting rights. As way of introduction, Annette Scott brings over 40 years of nursing experience to the table and still has time to get involved in voting rights and has served as a poll worker throughout her career. She joined the League of Women Voters Southern Monmouth County chapter in 2018 where she formed a partnership between the League and the New Jersey Reentry Corporation to launch the Reenter-Register-Vote program, which makes the voter registration process a regular part of a citizen's reentry into society once their sentence is complete. She started out teaching classes once a week at NJ Reentry's office in Neptune City, educating returning citizens, like those who had completed their felony sentence, about the right to vote and assisting them in their registration by reviewing and mailing each application. Since 2018, the Reenter-Register-Vote program has registered more than 5,000 citizens to vote and continues advocating for voting rights and access for returning citizens. Annette, we are so grateful to have you and to learn about your journey and your work. So, to start off, tell us how you got involved in voting rights activism and what makes you care so much about this fight.
Thank you. Well, I became involved through the League of Women Voters in 2018. I met a gentleman who was a League member and his wife, Saul and Diane Hara. And Saul asked me, would I like to observe him instruct a class in Neptune City, Monmouth County, for the reentry program, which I didn't really know anything about, and I did not know there were laws that were prohibiting people while incarcerated from voting, and at the time on parole or probation. So I met Saul and at the reentry program, and I have to share this with you. He said to me, Annette, meet me at 11 o'clock on Thursday at the reentry program. He gave me the address. He said, you watch me instruct a class, and then when I'm finished, if you'd like to do it, you can. I said, okay. So I met Saul. As we're walking in the classroom, he turned to me and he said, you know, Annette, I think it's better that you instruct the class today. What? But I did, and I've been doing it ever since. So thank you, Saul. And I was asked also, would I work with those on in parole or probation and the detainees in county jails? Now, unfortunately, at the time, we had to wait for the law to go in effect because it was voted on in October 2019. It was signed into law by Governor Murphy, December 17, 2019. However, we couldn't do anything because you have to wait 90 days after the law is signed by the governor, which meant March 17, 2020, I could register those on parole or probation. And I was asked by the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Corrections if I would, the New Jersey State Parole Board, if I would go to the parole facilities in New Jersey and register. And I did. I go from Cumberland County to Passaic, Mercer, and Camden. It's about 50 places that I visit every year, twice a year, prior to the primary and prior to the general election for them to vote. And the reason why I am so passionate about it, I have to share this with everyone too. Most people don't know, myself included, I didn't know at the time. In New Jersey, when a person is sentenced, the prosecutors in 21 counties will email or mail the local board of elections with that person's name and how long they're going to serve. So the League of Women Voters asked them why, since the person can't vote, they're not going to take them out to a polling place. They won't allow mail-in ballots, of course, so why? Unfortunately, no response. So that's just a form of voter suppression. Then the league asked, would you notify in all 21 counties when a person is released, give them their name and the date of release? Nope, no response. So knowing, because of the voting rights that I saw growing up as a child, people didn't have them. They couldn't register to vote in southern states and all the problems they had. And then when I learned how difficult it was for people incarcerated as well as those on parole or probation, I said, oh no, I have to work hard to do this. So it's been changing. And as you noted, I registered over 5,000, which is including the parole as well as the reentry and the county, 3 county jails now, because Monmouth is going to be my newest one that I'll be registering detainees with Ron Pierce from the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. So that's my story of how I got involved and how I'm still doing. And what we're trying to do is reach out more to county jails to do the detainees who are only arrested but not sentenced. And that's difficult. One of the most difficult things we have is that most people in New Jersey, both the people who have been incarcerated or parole or probation, as well as their families, they think because they committed a felony in New Jersey, they can never vote again. Not true. Other states, that is true. But in New Jersey, it's your status. The day you walk out of a correctional facility, you can register to vote.
Wow. What a cool story. Thank you. So, in your opinion, why is it crucial to restore the voting rights of people who have been on parole or probation, particularly for people of color?
Well, it's for those incarcerated, parole and probation, because the unfortunate thing is the largest majority of those have been incarcerated, parole, probation, and even the detainees that I visit are people of color. They're young men. And what was shocking to me when I went to a place in Newark, the average age was 18 to 21. And I just thought they should be in a college, on a college campus or working or vocational school, not here. And that just disturbed me so much. So I had to reach out and work even harder to reach them, because some of them feel voting does nothing. It means nothing. I don't get it. It doesn't help me in any way. So the volunteers I'm with said, that's not the lady you tell that to. So I gave them the history and when it couldn't vote, and even the problems in New Jersey and other places, and they understood. And when I told them, it was very sad to know, but in the United States of America, people were killed trying to register to vote. So I will always vote in their honor. And they said to me, I didn't know that. Wow. Okay, give me that paper. I'll register. Yay.
Wow. Well, then it sounds like you were the perfect person to say that to, actually.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So on that note, can you tell us a little bit more about the 1844 No More campaign?
Well, it's in New Jersey since 1844, when they created the law for those incarcerated not to be able to vote, and for those on parole or probation not to be able to vote, and especially at that time in 1844, it didn't primarily affect people of color. It affected white men who were low socioeconomic groups, but it kept them out. And most of the people of color kept them out too. So what they did in through the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice under Cunningham, Ron Rice, and several others, they created the campaign that they wanted to stop the not being able to vote, as 2 states, Maine and Vermont, never took away the right, and they wanted New Jersey to be the 3rd. So they thought by having this campaign to educate people about it, and the denial of while you're incarcerated, or having at the time being on parole or probation, not being able to vote. While it took off, but unfortunately, our legislature in Trenton, neither party supported people who are incarcerated to be able to vote. They were hoping New Jersey would be the third state after Maine and Vermont, but it didn't happen. The only thing that did happen was those on parole or probation. And what it meant was 83,000 people for the first time in 176 years would have been able to vote and take advantage of their right to vote. And unfortunately, again, for those incarcerated, no. And at that time, it would have meant another 30,000. The only thing that's happened since COVID, which was certainly very unfortunate, but it has allowed the correctional facilities to release the citizens who have been incarcerated, and now their population is less than 8,000. And as they're coming out, I am doing my best through all the reentry programs, parole program, whatever it may be, register them to vote. And it's been working.
That's amazing. So can you talk a little bit about, we'll do one more question and then we'll get into Q&A with our friend Nuzhat. What are some of the barriers to voting for people who have been incarcerated? You talked a little bit about how voting rolls are aware of people who are incarcerated, even if they have their voting right restricted. What are some of the other barriers?
Okay, the largest barrier is the citizens themselves don't know, because they do tell me that because they committed a felony, they can never vote again in New Jersey, and I correct them. There's several. Another one is for those citizens who were previously registered to vote and unfortunately were either incarcerated or parole probation, and they couldn't. They are said to me, they're waiting for New Jersey to restore their voting rights. And I said, never going to happen. You have to register again, just as you did before the first time, and then you're a new registration. So that helps. The other major restriction was when the Board of Elections received the information from the prosecutors, they were asking, and when the person registered to vote, when they looked at, of course, their database and saw that they incarcerated, what they were doing at first was looking at the websites for the DOC, Department of Corrections, and Promise/Gavel, and unfortunately, they weren't updated. And I met several people in various counties in the reentry programs who had been just released for 3, 4, 5 years, but the website still showed them as being incarcerated. So the League of Women Voters, the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and the ACLU contacted all 21 counties and asked them, please stop using that as a resource. And it's been working. And what we told the citizen is, if you get a letter stating that, shows you're incarcerated, call them, or better yet, go in person. The other thing was, most of the 21 counties, Board of Elections, what they were doing also was asking the citizen for their release documents. Now, the release documents contains all your personal judicial history that nobody should have access to but the citizen. So then again, the League and New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, ACLU, called all 21 counties and asked them, please stop doing that. It's not right that anybody else has that kind of their personal information. So what happened was they all use another resource. Now, for instance, in Monmouth County here, they call the DOC directly, and several other counties, most of them do too, and just to check that the person is released. If the person doesn't call or go in person, then that's what they've been doing. So those were the restrictions that most of them have, but the unfortunate one was the citizens themselves not knowing, nor their families, that they can register to vote and restore their voting rights.
It sounds like there's some good steps being taken.
Yeah,
Moving
yeah.
forward.
It's helped a lot.
That's great to hear. All right, so now we are going to transition into our Q&A. Please continue dropping any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the next few minutes. So I'll start with this question, and this one is for Nuzhat. What sort of measures does New Jersey currently have in the pipeline to strengthen democracy and achieve a more racially just democracy?
Yes, of course. New Jersey actually has a couple of really exciting pro-democracy initiatives, pieces of legislation that we at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice are very much in support of. So some pieces of legislation to keep an eye on is there is a campaign for same-day voter registration, which would allow voters to register at the polls on the day of the election. Same-day voter registration has been shown to increase voter turnout, specifically among Black population, Latino population, and other voters of color. So that is a piece of legislation that is currently in the legislature. We have our own, as I mentioned, we have our own New Jersey State Voting Rights Act that has been introduced. As I mentioned during my presentation, a state voting rights act would protect the right to vote and expand access to the ballot, such as language measures and things like that. And there's also an exciting new Voter Empowerment Act, which I was told earlier just passed the Assembly. But this would allow those who are 17 years old at the time of the primary, but who will turn 18 by the time of a general election to vote in the primary. So an exciting piece of legislation to encourage younger voters to really get out there and vote. So I encourage everyone to, take notice of these campaigns, but also New Jersey often introduces really exciting pieces of pro-democracy measures. And I think it's our job to make sure our legislators know that we are in support of those.
That's great to hear. Thank you. So the next question is for Annette. What other areas of opportunity are there for formerly incarcerated citizens, or really anyone interested in getting involved in elections?
Well, they can become poll workers. They have to be a registered voter and attend poll worker class. It's one day for a couple of hours. They would earn $21.43 an hour for early voting. And early voting is Monday through Saturday, 10 to 8, or 10 to 6 on Sunday. And what several of them can do, because a lot have said to me, but I work full time. So I said, well, if you work 7 to 3 or 8 to 4, you could get there and do from every day if you want, from 5 to closing time, and you still would get the money. And if you can work on election day, that's $300. The good thing is most counties, not mine, but most counties do not take out any deductions. You get a full check. So, and that adds to your income also. And most of them like that. Some of them have, when I said, if nothing else, if you're not working on the weekend, you could work Saturday and Sunday, Saturday 10 to 8 and Sunday 10 to 6 at $21.43 an hour. And I'm very happy to say, between the counties, I've had several, over 100 that have registered to be poll workers, and they call and tell me, I got my money. So I even ask them, can I drive you to the bank? No, I made it.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's good because, like, as I tell them, you need to know about the system, because a lot of people will say, oh, I only vote for the president. I only vote for the governor. And I said, yeah, but the mayor of your town or the councilman or the assemblyman or your state senator, you should know what they're doing for your community. And if you have children, you really want to know what the Board of Education is doing for your children's school. Are they putting money into it? Are they taking them on a trip? Do they updating their computers? What are they doing? That you should know. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Wow, they are lucky to have you, Annette.
Yeah.
All right. So this next question is for you both. So we'll start with Nuzhat. In your opinion, what is the next step New Jersey needs to take to advance a racially just democracy?
That's a great question. I think in order for New Jersey to really become a racially just democracy, we need to make sure that everyone has an equal access to the vote. The truth is that those who are eligible to vote in New Jersey, they have the right to vote, but that doesn't mean that they have equal access to the ballot. They face certain voters, especially voters of color, face obstacles when they are going to register, when they are going to vote, but vote by mail, when they go to vote at their polling sites. It's everyone can vote. Everyone who's eligible can vote, but they don't necessarily vote equally. And so New Jersey needs to make sure that we do have easy access democracy measures such as same-day voter registration. We need to make sure that we have expanded language access at the polls and protections for those who are disenfranchised so that they can go to court and make sure that their ballot is counted. For New Jersey to have an equal and racially just democracy, we have to make sure that everyone in the democracy can access the polls equally.
Very good. Agreed. And Annette?
Well, the most important, I think, is that those incarcerated should have the right to vote. Whatever they did, yes, they are there for, we want rehabilitative measures so they don't repeat it. But the most important is you don't lose your right to vote. They should have that while incarcerated and have more access to being able to participate in the democracy, so they fully understand it, why it's important that you participate, why you're a member of it's not so much the party as it is the democratic process. And that's would be good. And having even gone into schools, it makes a difference, because through Pat Suplee from the League of Women Voters, we went into a middle school and they were allowed to use real voting machines, and they voted for their favorite ice cream, toppings, cakes, and all those things. And every one of them said to me, I'm an adult now, even though they're only 9 or 10. I'm an adult now. I voted. I voted. I'm an adult. And I said, that's a wonderful thing. Now you have to pay taxes, though. Huh? Okay. So it just show you where the more people can participate, the more they know and the more they like it. They really do. And the one of the difficulties is with the voter registration application, I have to review them because they unfortunately make many errors, and they don't realize if it doesn't, a particular box or, entrance doesn't apply to them, they'll cross it out, put NA. And I was told that gets stamped invalid and boom, it's tossed. And that we don't want. So more people we have to volunteer and help with the voter registration application to make sure that it is complete correctly. That helps also get into the democratic process.
I like that. I like that. We call that democracy with a lowercase d.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you. So we have our final question. How can the people in the audience get involved and support your work? So we'll start with Annette.
I love volunteers. There is, what happens is fortunately, the state league has implemented a program that when I arrange and schedule all the visitation to the parole facilities, I list it with them, and then people can go on the website, and whatever date and time and place that you want to participate in, you can. You list your name, your email, and your telephone number, and I contact them and tell them what they need to do, review the voter registration application, because that's what you'll be doing, assisting me in that, and that you're very familiar with it. And then I tell them that the common errors that are made, and familiarize yourself with that, so that it makes it, when you're viewing, you got a sharper view of what you're looking for, and you can help.
Great. And Nuzhat?
Yeah, so the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice has a couple of different campaigns related to democracy and justice that we are currently working on right now. So we are working on same-day voter registration, trying to get that passed here in New Jersey. And we are working on the New Jersey Voting Rights Act as well. We very much love having people be involved. We have a lot of actions that these campaigns undertake: letter writing, calling your representative. We have rallies and things like that. So if you go to njisj.org, you can sign up for our newsletter, and our newsletter will keep you updated on those different campaigns and projects, as well as some of our other projects as well. And if you are specifically interested in working on the NJVRA or same-day voter registration, you can reach out to me directly, and I'm very happy to connect you and get you on those lists.
Great, thank you. And we're going to slowly transition so Sophia can catch up. Thank you both, Annette and Nuzhat, for all of your insight and advocacy to protect and strengthen voting rights and access in New Jersey.
You're more
As
than
it
welcome.
turns out, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Annette.
I was saying you're more than welcome, and thank you for having me.
And as it turns out, we are out of time for now. We encourage everyone to follow Nuzhat and Annette. Their accounts and contact information are on the slide here. Thank you once again to our co-sponsors, and a special thanks to Sofia Rosa from Latino Action Network for translating this evening. Once again, this was the 4th webinar in the Social Justice and Equity series. Stay tuned for more information about the next webinar in the Social Justice and Equity series, which will be on immigration reform. Enjoy your evening, everyone, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.